So yeah, did any of you happen to watch the 12 Days of OpenAI? Raise your hands if you did. Cool. Well, we got a few, but basically, 12 Days of OpenAI was like a little event they organized around Christmas time, where they finally released a whole bunch of news about what they've been working on for the past month, or maybe even a year or more. So yeah, it's a lot of cool stuff. A lot of it is just features they added to ChatGPT and the APIs to make it more usable, but a lot of it, like Sora and L3, are somewhat completely new models, which are groundbreaking in some sense. Oh, shit. So yeah, and alongside OpenAI, there's also been a lot of products coming out from the competitors like DeepSeek and Gemini, and yeah, we'll get right into it. So yeah, I'll give a brief overview of the main products that came out. So Google's VO2 is a video generation model which competes with OpenAI's Sora. And yeah, it just generates really high quality video based off a single text prompt. And the Gemini 2.0 is Google's corollary to the GPT-4 and GPT-4o, and it's really significant in the sense that it's good at handling multimedia inputs, asking it to analyze images, videos, etc. And DeepSeek v3 is DeepSeek's corollary of GPT-4 and 4o. And it's really impressive, especially because if you look at the parameters, it's only 607 billion. And if you compare that to 4o, I think it's like 1.8 trillion, or it's definitely more than 1 trillion. So it's extremely impressive. So yeah, let's do a quick demo of the real-time API.
So we made a little chatbot, or not chatbot, an AI that we gave instructions, basically let it know what it is and what it exactly does, give it personality and more instructions. So let's give it a crack.
Yo, what's up? I'm Harazkat, Michigan State AI Club expert, and you're what's up? Yo, what's good? Yo, what's good? What's good, bro?
That's internet right there. That's an internet issue.
No, it's waiting for waiting for us to respond. Something angry Aussie.
Seems like you've got some connection issues. The internet be wildin' sometimes.
So basically, we told it to be as tech bro-ish as you can be, and I guess this is its impression of a tech bro.
Oh, gotcha. Sounds like you're talking about making the convo as human-like as possible, huh? Trying to give it that human touch.
So let's say we give it a talk to an artist I'm talking to right now.
Exactly. And I'm here chatting with you, just like a real convo. So, what's on your mind?
I ran an hour late to my CSC capstone. Am I cooked?
Oof. That's tough, bruh. Being late to the capstone ain't ideal, but as long as it doesn't become a habit, you should be fine. Just make sure to catch up on what you missed.
They said I'm going to get kicked out of the class.
Lamau, getting roasted for being late. That's rough, buddy. Just take the L this time and make sure to set a couple of alarms next time. You'll bounce back. W's only.
Yeah, that's basically a little chat about our voice conversation you can make.
Nice. Oh, yeah, I got you.
Yeah, it's just a little quick demo that we showed. Anyone can do this. You just need a little bit of money to make an API key. Once you do that, you can talk to the AI and obviously make it customized to whatever you want. So, for example, that one was Harazkat. I don't know how you can introduce himself, very rude of him. But he's basically our little mascot, if we could call that a mascot.
All right, so let's move on. So yeah, actually, for applications like what we just witnessed here, we have to fine-tune models, right? So most of you probably heard of fine-tuning. It's where you take a base model which is trained on general data and train it on very specific data so it's better in certain use cases, right? Like a lot of companies are using ChatGPT as their customer support bot, and they would train fine-tune ChatGPT on specific customer support queries, right? Raise your hand if you've heard of this. Right? Yeah, most people. This is pretty commonplace. But this has an issue with the chain of thought models, right? OpenAI O1 and O3, which we will get into, because a reasoning model's output is not just the final answer. It is all the quote-unquote reasoning steps it took to get there. And to fine-tune a reasoning model with this method, you need human annotations of every individual thought. As you can imagine, this is a very time-consuming method to get this done. So in the 12 days of OpenAI, they also announced reinforcement fine-tuning, which is more applicable to these chain of thought models like O1. So what it does, well, first I should give a reminder of what chain of thought models do, right? They generate a certain series of steps which help them get to the answer. And what reinforcement fine-tuning does is that it lets it generate a variety of answers, and then it gives a reward every time it generates a better answer, so that you're prioritizing that specific chain of thought. For example, in the announcement video, they gave an example of using O1 to find a specific gene that was causing a disease based on a text description. And as you can see in that array over there, those are the top genes that the model came up with. The correct gene was the green one, but it didn't come up with it right off the bat. So the grader, quote unquote, rewarded the model by giving it a higher score. So that chain of thought is basically emphasized. So this is pretty cool because it allows applications like these to also use reasoning models, making it more powerful.
This video is AI generated. So I just reviewed Sora. This was like a week and a half ago. It was OpenAI's video generation model, and it was really impressive, until Google showed up. So they've just unveiled their latest and greatest, probably inspired by Sora just getting announced. But the scary thing is, it's already noticeably better than Sora. See, Sora would struggle with some predictable things I talked about in my video, things like physics and moving objects. And Veo already seems to be significantly better at that stuff specifically. So Sora would often have dead giveaways just in the movement of things or in the physics of things moving around in a frame. And Veo would tackle the same prompt and make a much more convincing, at least physical version of that movement. And so with these starting to show up, a lot of people are reacting like, oh, well, these are just the best hand-picked versions that Google is showing us. Maybe it's not that much better, but I've had access to Veo 2 for a couple of days now, and I've been doing a lot of prompting and a lot of back-to-back testing with Sora. And yeah, it's better than Sora. Now, it's certainly not perfect. There are definitely still dead giveaways in there of AI-generated video, especially with garbled text. That still happens a lot. Also, when you try to do a whole bunch of things in one scene or really, really complicated physics things, then it can still sort of break down. And also, this version that I'm testing doesn't have nearly as many controls as Sora. It feels like they rushed it out to match the OpenAI announcement, but there's no resolution controls or picking the length of the video, for example. But
So yeah, as you guys saw, those are the demos of OpenAI's Sora and Google's Veo models, and as you can see, it's almost hyper-realistic. It's crazy that it comes up with it with a single prompt. So they use a diffusion transformer model. I'll get into more of that. But essentially, diffusion is what these models have been using for a long time to make those AI-generated images. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of that online, right? And transformers is essentially what ChatGPT is based off, right? It's an architecture specifically made for sequential data. And it's kind of, you can intuitively see why that works well for videos, right? I mean, it's a combination of images. It's a sequence of images, so it only intuitively makes sense. But yeah, Google's Veo is touted as being better by a lot of people who reviewed it. And it makes sense, especially when you think about how Google owns YouTube and has access to literally all the data that's on there, while OpenAI has to scrape for bits and pieces. So, yeah.
this video is
So yeah, let's go deeper into VO2 since it came out so recently. So this is a prompt we gave to VO2. As you can see, it's pretty detailed. And you know what, just read it for a few seconds and try to think of what you would expect it to look like. I'm sure you guys have an image in your head by now. Let's see how well VO does it. Here.
That's the video. That's the one more time.
Oh, man. Yeah. So as you can see, I'm sure you guys could have noticed that it was an AI video if you looked at it pretty closely. But if you just look at the amount of detail, especially in the Terminator model, right? The amount of like highly detailed features of the robot, it's really crazy that it came up with that just based off a prompt. And yeah, let's get into OpenAI 03. So this is what they came out with on the last day of 12 days of OpenAI. And essentially it's a successor to OpenAI's 01 model. And it's just it uses essentially the same methods, but it's a much bigger model. And these are a few of its benchmarks, and it's just absolutely crazy, right? Like, if you guys have ever done a leak code question, you know how hard those can be. Code Forces is just like that or even harder. And 03 ranks in ranks among some of the best Code Forces humans in the world. So it's pretty impressive. And I also want to go deeper onto the Epoch AI Frontier math benchmark because it looks unimpressive at first at only 25% accuracy. But that benchmark is made by people the likes of Terence Tao. You guys might have heard of him. He's often touted as being one of the world's best mathematicians right now. Him and just a whole crew of other mathematicians, some of which are like Fields Medal receivers, right? They came up with these problems which supposedly took them multiple days to make. And O3 still had a 25% accuracy on these problems, which is especially wild when you compare it to like a 2% accuracy with other models. That doesn't even seem like useful in any sense. So huge improvement. And these are some of the benchmarks of DeepSeek V3. So as we said, DeepSeek, the V3 is DeepSeek's corollary to GPT-4 or 4.0. And as you can see, it beats a lot of models in so many benchmarks. And yeah, this is especially impressive, like I said, given how low the compute cost of DeepSeek is. It's only a fraction. And on top of that, DeepSeek achieved this with supposedly much fewer resources. So this is a research feat. Oh yeah, I'll get into R1. I believe that's up next. Oh. Okay, so I'll just get into DeepSeek R1 right here. So R1 is DeepSeek's counterpart of O1. It's their chain of thought model, and the benchmarks are somewhere further in the slide. But it had just like V3, it competes with O1 in nearly all benchmarks, again at a fraction of the cost. So yeah, DeepSeek's just making a lot of waves.
You might have to play that.
Click again, down.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, okay.
So I'm testing out O3 Mini High first. And the task is that I'm asking the model to use Python to implement a code generator and executor. So if I launch this, run this like Python script, it will launch a server locally with a UI that contains a text box. And then we can make coding requests in a text box. It will send the request to call O3 Mini API, and O3 Mini API will solve the task and return a piece of code, and it will then save the code locally on my desktop, and then open a terminal to execute the code automatically. So it's a
pretty complicated
task, right? And it outputs like a big chunk of code. So if we copy the code and paste it to our server. And then we would like to launch this server.
So we should get a text box when you're launching it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Oh yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It seems to be launching something. Oh, great. We have a UI where we can enter some coding prompts. Let's try out a simple one, like train OpenAI and a random number. Submit. So it's sending the request to O3 mini medium, so it should be pretty fast, right? So on this
41.
terminal, yeah, 41. That's the magic number, right?
So yeah, as you guys can see, that's what they were able to do with O3. They were able to make just a whole full-fledged app in one prompt. I mean, you know, and you can imagine how with just a few more prompts, how much further you can go. And I talked, so this is, I'm gonna go a bit deeper into DeepSeek. I've talked about a lot of this already, but there's one thing I wanted to double down on, which is that, and it's arguably a big reason why DeepSeek manages to compete with OpenAI despite much fewer resources and much fewer cost of computing. So it's this thing called the mixture of experts architecture. And essentially, instead of having one gigantic neural network, the mixture of experts has a bunch of small modules which specialize in their own task. And this is actually a very old concept. It came out in, I believe, like the 90s or maybe even the 80s. And it made a comeback last year with the Mistral 8x7b model. And DeepSeek was able to use this architecture to get crazy gains on performance while keeping the compute cost low. So I just wanted to point that out. And yeah, these are the DeepSeek R1 benchmarks I was talking about. As you can see, it beats OpenAI O1 in nearly all aspects. I'd like to hand this over to Abdullah now to get deeper into R.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me okay? All right, how many of you guys have heard of the term AGI? Just like quick raise of hands. All right, that's a good amount. So basically the ultimate goal with all this language model stuff is we want to make an AGI, an artificial general intelligence, right? So we see these cool slides from earlier of being good at math and being good at coding, but this is really only from giving the model good and bad coding and telling it this is good coding, do just like it. So it's just pattern recognition at its core. What we want is a model that can take a problem that we don't even know the answer to and solve it for us. That's what AGI means. That's what we're trying to get. And the very first step is this benchmark, like this test for language models called the ARC. It's a company called ARC, the AGI benchmark, the Artificial General Intelligence Benchmark. Now, if you try to look at that graph, it's a little faint, but those blue lines on the left, those are other different benchmarks that we use for language models. And that human capability dotted line, that's how well humans typically do on those like tests. So those blue lines are like language understanding, comprehension, syntax, all that stuff. Language models are just as good, if not like a quarter better than humans are at most of that stuff. But if you look at the bottom, that's the actual ARC AGI test. You see it's not even like half of what a human can do until like the ARC prize launch thing, which I'll get into later. But let me tell you guys what ARC AGI even is. So ARC is a company made by a guy called François. He made something called Keras, which, if you're familiar with PyTorch, which is like the underlying structure behind everything neural network now, it's like pretty similar to it. So he's a pretty smart guy. He's been in the business for a really long time. And essentially, 5 years ago, in like 2019, he locked himself in his lab for a summer and wrote this insanely long 50-page research paper all by himself called On the Measure of Intelligence. And what he wanted to do is actually get models that wouldn't just do pattern recognition, they'd actually be able to think beyond what they were given, you know? Think like a human would. And so he kind of had the thought process to make this benchmark. And so before I go into this, let me tell you what the benchmark is. So he wanted the benchmark to be something where you wouldn't just be able to be good at it through memorization, you'd actually have to logic through it. And actually just 2 weeks ago, he was quoted saying that if your model isn't good at the AGI benchmark, then it's just completely intolerant at any sort of like thinking or logical ability. So it goes to show how kind of important this benchmark is. And I guess like the genius, elegant solution he got was just you take boxes with colors and you just pattern them. Like if you have a 2x2 box and you make 3 of the squares light blue and the top right one dark blue, you want to give a model light orange box of 3, you want it to, do a dark orange box. So that's literally all this benchmark is. It's just filling in patterns of colors and boxes. And so this was really, really hard for even the best language models. Like if you look at the right, or the left side, I mean, that's O1, which is, like the best model almost any of us can use right now. And it's getting like 32%, even on like the very highest setting, which is using as much compute cost as it can. And as Malhar was talking about, O3 came out in like December, and it absolutely crushed all these benchmarks. It got like, 76%, 88%, but that's on the tune settings. And that's basically OpenAI taking their normal O3 model and just training it a little bit more so it can do just as high as possible on this benchmark. But still, insanely high, almost like, STEM grad level, which is crazy. But there is one really big downside, which is that logarithmic cost per task scale on the bottom. That O3 thing was like a $3,000 run, which is insanely expensive, which is also why DeepSeek and, the NVIDIA stock has crashed today, because it showed that we need to really push towards like a lot more efficient language models. And so, yeah, that's really what the new frontier in AI is now, is trying to get models that can really just reason and as efficient as possible. And if you want to try out the challenge for yourself, we actually have the QR codes here. So literally, it'll take you to their website. If you scan those QR codes, feel free to work in groups. That left one will give you a really brief, simple puzzle. Like it'll take you like a minute. But the ones on the right, that's like actual examples from the ones look of a language model. And I'm going to be honest, one of those took me like 15 minutes. So you better hurry before we have to leave at 7, because this is actually pretty tricky. So yeah, feel free to work in groups if you want as well.